Prince William stood on one side of the divide, pushing for clarity, transparency, and the moral high ground. On the other, Camilla urged caution, fearing that any comment would only stoke further drama. The debate tore through palace walls for months, driven by a singular question: should the monarchy publicly address the swirling chaos around Archie and Lilibet? The internal friction revealed deeper anxieties within the House of Windsor, not just about two children, but about the institution's very ability to adapt. When the palace finally broke its silence, it wasn't a spontaneous move. It was a result of internal battles where every word was measured and every silence carried. If you love getting the real story behind the palace walls, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and tap the notification bell so you never miss an update. In choosing to speak, the monarchy didn't just correct the record, it confronted a crisis years in the making. The official statement wasn't reactive, it was strategic, compassionate, and deliberate. It offered more than names or titles. It offered a gesture of protection and a restoration of dignity. For once, the institution placed the welfare of the most vulnerable ahead of optics. And in that moment, it proved that leadership isn't just about preserving heritage, it's about earning trust, especially when it's been fraying at the seams. So, it finally happened. After years of conspiracy theories, awkward silences, and mounting public pressure, Buckingham Palace finally broke the wall of silence surrounding Archie and Lilibet. Yes, that Archie and Lilibet, the children of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, the royal toddlers who, until now, have lived more in rumor than reality. For a family obsessed with image control, the palace's decision to go public marks a turning point not just for them, but for how legacy institutions survive in a digital world that doesn't wait for press briefings. This wasn't just a statement. It was damage control. Royal level, legacy defending, institution-saving damage. Because let's be clear, the mystery surrounding these children didn't stay in the tabloids. It didn't stay in polite royal gossip. It mutated. It festered. And the palace's silence only made it worse. The less they said, the more people speculated. And the speculation wasn't harmless. It was invasive. It was bizarre. And in many cases, it was outright malicious. Conspiracy theories were thriving in the void Buckingham Palace left wide open, and Archie and Lilibet became the unwilling faces of it. If you love getting the real story behind the palace walls, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and tap the notification bell so you never miss an update. For years, there were no official confirmations, no routine public appearances, and no meaningful acknowledgement from the palace. That vacuum gave way to a storm of misinformation. Claims about the children's existence, their legitimacy, their place in the royal line, every aspect of their lives was dissected, debated, and distorted. The damage wasn't just to Harry and Meghan. It was a direct hit to the institution's credibility. If people could start to believe the royal family was hiding children, what else might they believe? And more importantly, who would they trust instead? The tipping point came not with a scandal, but with sustained reputational bleeding. Internally, the royal household knew it couldn't keep dodging this. And behind the scenes, the conversations got tense. This wasn't some neat, unified palace consensus. It was a family divided. King Charles reportedly leaned toward caution. He believed in restraint, in upholding the royal mystique. Queen Camilla took a similar view, worried that acknowledging the noise would only give it more life. But William and Catherine weren't having it. They wanted action. Not for politics or headlines, but out of genuine concern. Concern for the institution, yes, but also for the children. Because at some point, it stopped being about strategy. It became about princess and, unsurprisingly, cut through the royal hand-wringing with her usual. She warned that silence was making things worse. That the royal family was leaving a vacuum, and in today's world, someone will fill it. And they won't be kind. She was right. That vacuum had become a breeding ground for viral faucets, dragging innocent children into adult conflicts, royal feuds, and internet-fueled culture. Eventually, that internal pressure, combined with growing public frustration, led to the palace doing what it should have done a long time ago, speaking up. And when they did, they didn't overdo it. The statement was strategic, measured, compassionate, without being emotional, clear, without being reactive. It confirmed what many had quietly suspected and others loudly demanded. Archie and Lilibet are legitimate royal children. They are recognized. They are protected. And they deserve to be left out of the chaos. No pageantry. No finger-pointing. Just clarity. And it landed exactly the way it needed. The reaction? Swift and significant. In the UK, media outlets that had previously treaded carefully around the subject acknowledged the palace had finally done the responsible thing. In the US, where the conversation around Meghan and Harry has always been louder and messier, the response was one of surprise and, frankly, relief. People were ready to move on, but only with the truth. And now, they had it. Even online, where theories had reached a fever pitch, the energy changed. Some doubled down, of course, because internet conspiracies don't just vanish. But many others backed off. The palace's credibility, once quietly eroding, began to stabilize. That's the power of a statement. Of facts. But let's not forget, this wasn't just a comms win. This was a necessary response to a crisis of the monarchy's own making. The palace's years of ambiguity gave these conspiracies room to grow. They let the issue simmer until it boiled. And the fact that it took this long to protect 2 children from being consumed by the internet's worst impulses, that's not just a miscalculation. It's a moral failure. What this really highlights is a gap between royal protocol and modern reality. For centuries, the monarchy has thrived on selective transparency, on saying only what it must, and letting mystique do the rest. But in 2025, that model is broken. The public doesn't just want information. It needs it. Silence doesn't suggest dignity anymore. It suggests guilt, or weakness, or indifference. And when silence puts children at the center of conspiracies, that's not just outdated. It's William and Catherine understood that. Their push for transparency wasn't just a PR strategy. It was a reflection of evolving leadership. That's the difference between protecting tradition and becoming a relic. Leaders today don't get to stay above the fray. They have to step into it. Thoughtfully, decisively. And in this case, stepping in meant stepping up. For Archie, for Lilibet, and for an institution teetering on the edge of the decision to speak was also data-driven. Reports suggest the palace had been tracking digital sentiment, seeing just how far these rumors were spreading, how embedded they were becoming in online discourse. The numbers weren't small. The reach wasn't niche. These narratives had legs. And the longer they stayed unchallenged, the more legitimate they seemed. So, yes, when they finally responded, it wasn't just heartfelt. This moment also reflects something bigger than the royals. It's a lesson about how institutions, any institutions, have to evolve in real time. The monarchy, for all its pomp and tradition, is still a brand in the digital age. And brands don't get to ignore public perception anymore. They have to engage. They have to clarify. They have to own the narrative, or risk having it hijacked. Because while silence used to be a luxury, it's now the palace, by finally breaking that silence, took a step not just toward clarity, but toward accountability, toward acknowledging that there are consequences to letting falsehoods run unchecked, and that those consequences, when aimed at children, are unacceptable. So where does this leave Archie and Lilibet? Hopefully, in peace. They didn't ask to be avatars for public distrust, for royal tension, or for social media spectacle. They deserve privacy. They deserve respect. And now that the palace has spoken, there's a renewed chance they might finally get it. This isn't about sides. It's not about Harry versus William, or tradition versus rebellion. It's about truth. And protecting that truth, especially when it involves children, should never be. So let us know what you think. Did the palace wait too long? Was this enough to reset the public conversation? Or is this just the beginning of a new era of royal transparency? Drop a comment. Hit that like button and share this with someone who's been caught up in the noise. And if you want more real talk about the meltdowns, messes, and missteps from the world's most powerful institutions, go ahead and subscribe. We'll keep watching what they don't want you to see and breaking it down when it finally breaks through. Because for all the centuries of prestige, diamonds, and royal decrees, the truth is brutally simple. The modern monarchy lives and dies by public perception. And public perception? It moves faster than royal protocol. This entire Archie and Lilibet ordeal, years in the making, wasn't just a PR misstep. It was a symptom of a much deeper issue. The royal institution's fear of transparency nearly cost it something it can't afford to lose in 2025, relevance. And let's be real. when you can't even confirm your own great-grandchildren's status without it turning into a global conspiracy, something has gone very wrong. That's why this moment feels like a crack in the royal marble. Not a collapse, but a deep, visible shift. Because this statement didn't just clarify the facts. It admitted, indirectly, quietly, that silence doesn't protect the crown anymore. It just protects chaos. And the chaos had become impossible to ignore. There's a reason this wasn't just another media cycle. The speculation about Archie and Lilibet didn't stay on gossip blogs. It bled into mainstream conversation, political commentary, international headlines. Their names became shorthand for royal dysfunction. And even worse, they became collateral in a cold war between old-world tradition and digital-age accountability. Which brings us back to the core of all of this, the children. Because no matter where you fall in the Harry and Meghan saga, whether you see them as whistleblowers or drama magnets, Archie and Lilibet were never supposed to be part of that equation. But the palace's refusal to communicate made it almost impossible to separate them. And when adults in power don't take the steps to protect kids from being pulled into narratives they didn't create, they are not being dignified. They are being negligent. That's the ugly truth behind the polished exterior. This wasn't just about titles or lineage. It was about accountability. And until now, that accountability had been nowhere to be found. But something shifted. Whether it was pressure from William and Catherine, stern warnings from Anne, or even cold, hard analytics showing how deep the rot had gone, something finally made the palace do what it almost never does, respond. And not in a passive-aggressive, buried-in-a-bulletin kind of way, but in a direct, declarative statement that addressed the issue head-on. Not with emotion, not with defensiveness, just clarity. A formal acknowledgement that Archie and Lilibet are recognized as legitimate members of the royal family, that they are entitled to privacy, and that speculation about them is not just unwelcome. And in those carefully curated lines, the palace sent a message louder than any speech or appearance. We're still in control. But they're not really. Not in the way they used to be. This wasn't control. It was correction. The monarchy was reacting, not leading. And while the statement might have calmed the waters for now, it also exposed just how vulnerable the institution has become to the forces it used to rise. That's the part that stings. Because for all their insistence on neutrality and tradition, the royal family was letting two of its youngest members become pawns in a global misinformation game. They waited until the damage was visible, until the public perception was unraveling, until conspiracy theories were bleeding into mainstream thought. And then, only then, did they. It's not admirable. It's necessary. And necessity is never flattering. But still, it mattered. The response worked. It was restrained, yes, but it was also strategic. The palace didn't overplay it. They didn't drag Harry and Meghan back into the spotlight. They didn't stir up more drama. They just delivered the fact in a tone that said, "This is the line. Don't cross it again." And the public heard it. The speculation slowed. The conversation shifted. Even the loudest voices online had to pause. Because once the palace speaks, the dynamic changes. The vacuum that had fueled the rumors for so long, it closed. But if you think this is the last time the palace will face this kind of pressure, think again. The game has changed. This is what leadership looks like now. Not hiding behind tradition, but showing up with clarity when it counts. The public won't settle for carefully staged and half smiles on the balcony anymore. They want accountability, transparency, reality. The palace knows that now. They had no choice. Because this wasn't just about Archie and Lilibet. This was about the monarchy showing it can learn, even if it learns slowly, reluctantly, and only after the damage has been done. It was about protecting the future of the institution by protecting the actual future. And at the heart of it all, the reminder is painfully clear. Silence is never neutral. In a world where misinformation moves faster than truth, silence is a decision. And for years, the palace made the wrong one. They let strangers define their story. They let children become controversy. They let confusion erode credibility. But they've now chosen the correct course. Late? Yes. Imperfect? Definitely. But finally, they spoke. And that statement didn't just serve the public. It served the crown. Because institutions don't fall from one scandal. They fall from erosion. And when the public starts to question the smallest truths, the larger structure is already at. So this moment, it was about shoring up the foundation, reminding the world and themselves that the monarchy can respond when it matters, that it can choose truth over image, that it can step out of the 19th century and, for once, speak directly to the world it actually exists in. And now, it's up to them to follow through, because saying something once isn't enough. The public is watching. The press is watching. And more than anyone, Archie and Lilibet will grow up watching how this was handled. Was it a turning point or a temporary fix? Only time will tell. But this much is certain. What they said mattered. Not just for two children, but for an entire institution standing at a crossroad between secrecy and survival. And now that the dust is finally beginning to settle, let's talk about what this actually means going forward. Because this wasn't just a one-time crisis management moment. This was 4 years. The British royal family relied on tradition as both armor and excuse. The playbook was always, say less, appear poised, let the press speculate, and move on. But the Archie and Lilibet situation shattered the illusion that no comment is a neutral move. It's not. In the age of 24/7 commentary and viral misinformation, no comment is a comment. It's passive endorsement. It's tacit approval. And in this case, it was interpreted, fairly or not, as a refusal to acknowledge two children who became the targets of online hysteria. So when the palace finally spoke, it was less about the content of the statement and more about what it symbolized. It was an admission that the way things have always been done simply doesn't work anymore. That you can't ignore something and expect it to disappear. That in 2025, silence doesn't uphold dignity, it invites chaos. And chaos, as the royals learned the hard way, doesn't care about protocol. Let's not forget how we got here. This was never just about Meghan and Harry being controversial figures. It wasn't just about Megxit, or the Oprah interview, or the Netflix documentary. Those were all pieces of a larger cultural shift. But this particular issue, the ambiguity around Archie and Lilibet, was something else entirely. This wasn't tabloid drama. It was an ethical dilemma. Because these weren't adults trading in interviews or sound bites. These were children. And for a global institution to allow those children to become the subjects of falsehoods, identity speculation, and international conspiracy theories, it crossed a line. And the monarchy knew it. You don't issue a formal, carefully constructed statement like this unless you've run out of options. Unless you've realized the cost of inaction is now outweighing the cost of engagement. Because even though the royal family never wants to be reactive, this was the clearest example of reaction they've shown in. But don't mistake the palace's statement for total transparency. It wasn't a tell-all. It didn't name names or reference any of the specific rumors. That's not how the institution operates, and it never will. What it did do, though, was reaffirm the children's status in clear, unambiguous terms. No royal spin. No defensiveness. Just, these are recognized members of the royal family. They are protected. Full stop. That was the tone they needed to strike. And for once, they got it. Because at the heart of all this, there's a much bigger question playing out. What is the role of monarchy in an era defined by digital accountability? What does it mean to be a modern royal when information moves faster than diplomacy? When the public no longer tolerates ambiguity, especially when it comes to protecting children? It means adaptation isn't optional. It's survival. And this moment, this long overdue acknowledgement, wasn't just about public relations. It was about legitimacy. Not Archie and Lilibet's. The monarchy's. Because when a royal institution lets conspiracy theories take root about its own family members and says nothing, it invites people to question everything else. If the palace can't confirm the simplest truths, why should anyone believe what it says about anything else? That's where the statement came in. It wasn't just a gesture of compassion. It was a repair job, a way to patch the cracks in public trust that had been spreading with every day of silence. And the reaction showed that people were ready for it. Not just fans of the Sussexes, not just royal watchers, but regular people who were tired of the noise, tired of the speculation, and ready to see some basic decency. That's the power of doing the bare minimum after refusing to do it for so long. It suddenly feels massive, transformative, but it shouldn't have taken this long. It should never take this long to say that children are real, that they matter, and that they deserve privacy. Now here's the part that matters moving forward. Will this be a one-time response? Or the beginning of a more thoughtful, more human approach from the firm? Because this moment, this course correction, shouldn't be the end of the conversation. It should be the start of a broader shift. If the monarchy wants to survive into the next generation with even a shred of relevance, it needs to reframe how it handles misinformation. It needs to stop hiding behind tradition when the world is demanding. No one's asking for live-stream family dinners at Windsor. But basic, respectful transparency, that's not controversial. That's common sense. And the longer the royals resist that, the more they risk losing the very thing they are desperate to protect: legitimacy, trust, that fragile public contract that says, we believe in this institution because it behaves with dignity and fairness. And dignity, in this context, means showing up, not hiding. The palace did the right thing. But let's not congratulate them too much. This wasn't heroic. It was overdue. It was a response to mounting pressure that should have never existed in the first place. But it's still important, because when you've gone too long without speaking, even a whisper can sound like thunder, and people listened. So now, here we are. The palace has spoken. The children acknowledged. The worst of the speculation, for now, has been deflated. But what's next? That depends on how the royals handle the next inevitable storm, because there will be one. There always is. The question is whether this was a fluke or the start of something smarter. Because if the monarchy truly wants to preserve itself, it has to learn how to live in the real world. Not just perform tradition, but understand the responsibility that comes with being watched, judged, and scrutinized in real time. And that means recognizing that people expect truth. They expect clarity. And yes, they expect the palace to protect its most vulnerable, not after months of chaos, but before the damage is. So if you're someone who's been watching the saga unfold and wondering if the royals would ever do the right thing, you weren't alone. And now that they have, the real test begins, whether they'll keep doing it. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Did the palace say enough? Was it too late? Or is this finally a sign they are waking up to the world outside their gates? Like if you're tired of institutions hiding behind silence, share with someone who's been glued to this drama like the rest of us. And if you want more deep dives into royal messes, PR fails, and the meltdowns that make headlines, subscribe. Because in the modern world, every tradition eventually hits a reckoning. And when it does, we'll be here to talk about it.